Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. In today's video I wanted to do a campaign summary, or part one of our campaign summary for the Endless Realms campaign. I already covered this in a couple other videos, so I won't do a ton of backstory. Basically, this was my attempt to blend the rules from Endless Realms with the setting of a game called Knights of Gossamer and Shadow, and then just throw in a bunch of my own weird crazy ideas on top of that, and just try to make something different and interesting. My idea was I wanted to have a combination of fantasy, science fiction, like some weird like cyberpunk stuff. I wanted to have some like steampunk at some point, but we never really managed to fit it in. We did have some weird like Tesla coil powered planet though, which the players went to. That was kind of cool. And as luck would have it, we ended up with pretty much most of that stuff. We also had kaiju versus giant mechs. We'll talk about that, of course. Good old tribute to Pacific Rim there. I talked in the last video how I knew that because the players were from a fantasy setting and a fantasy world, it wouldn't really be fair to expect them to understand how to operate a lot of stuff in a high-tech world. So I wanted to make sure that they could meet different NPCs, most of whom were just kind of transitory. They didn't really matter much. But different people that they could meet, that they could help, and that could help them so that they could like navigate these worlds, right? I also knew that it was going to be important that magic characters be able to use magic anywhere, even in high-tech worlds. But in order to kind of explain why our world doesn't seem to have real magic, I just made it more difficult to cast spells in these worlds. And to compensate, I made other worlds where they were very magic rich, and it was much easier to cast spells in those worlds. So basically I just adjusted the mana cost up or down, depending if it was magic poor or magic rich world, right? Anyways, so the campaign began, and the players woke up from like basically hypersleep, and they were in all these like cylinders. They had no idea what was going on. They look around, like they managed to get out of the cylinders. They start looking around, and they realize that there's other cylinders with a few people in it too. They decided not to open most of those. There was one where there was like these red flashing lights, and the person was clearly dead on the inside because it malfunctioned. So the players get out. They begin to explore their surroundings. They almost immediately meet some insane, who's basically a crewman on the ship, and he tries to kill them, but the party managed to overpower him. Of course, they've already got their gear back and stuff by now, and they managed to get out of their ship and realize that they're actually like in a much bigger ship. So that basically it was like a space station. So their ship that they were on was docked at a space station. The space station is run by like an AI known as Sovereign, and Sovereign tries to convince the players to go to the medical bay, the med bay, so that they can, be scanned and checked for injuries. And the players at first, they're like, okay, this is probably a good idea. But Sovereign, like, keeps telling them about how, you should go to med bay so that I can examine you in case there's any injuries. And he just keeps kind of saying this over and over again. And so, fortunately, my players started to get suspicious, which is what I wanted. They ended up running into more of the crazy, insane crewmen. And along the way, they meet this woman named Dr. Song. And Dr. Song was actually patterned after a Korean like MMA ring girl, who walks around with cards. And I think she's like a model or something as well, right? And basically, Dr. Song isn't actually human. She's actually like an AI-driven like android, right? Which is also why she's incredibly good looking. I chose a woman that kind of looked like she could actually be an android in real life. So, I'll put a picture of her up here, purely for research, of course. And anyways, they end up teaming up with her, and along the line, they end up meeting two other people, a guy named Cal and another woman by the name of Bae Suzy. Now, some of you may recognize the name Bae Suzy, actually. She's actually like a Korean actress and former pop star, I think. She was also an android. But she actually was self-aware and knew she was an android. Dr. Song at this point did not know she was an android. However, the players did start to suspect. So by now, they've got their like 3 NPCs that they've teamed up with, 2 androids. Cal's not an android. And they decide to try to like escape the ship. And Cal tells him he actually knows a way off. So they fight their way through like a bunch more crew members. They fight their way through some like droids that are run by Sovereign. It turns out that I'll just call them the Korean droids because that's what they are essentially. They're all Koreans. They're the space Koreans. Um, they saw what was happening to some of the other droids and how Sovereign seemed to have been like reawakened and was basically just reprogramming them all. So they just haven't charged themselves and docked with the space station because they're like, yeah, whatever it's doing is putting some sort of virus in us and it's taking us all over. And we don't want that. But it also means that our poor androids are running low on power because they haven't been able to, recharge in a while. Anyways, uh, they managed to fight their way back with Cal and the droids to their ship, uh, power up the ship again, and because the droids are familiar with this world and Cal's a little familiar with it, they're able to escape. Actually, not in their ship; they escape in Cal's ship. That's right, and head down to this planet, which appears to be basically dead. On the planet itself, though, they find this temple, and the temple is like 2,000 feet high, right? It is just absolutely massive. The doors are huge. They go in and they end up fighting all these like weird spirit things that basically turned out to be like the remnants of the followers of like whatever the dead thing is. They basically worship that as a god, if it is or isn't. Whatever. It's actually what a Typhonian is what they're called in this universe, but whatever. Um, so they end up managing to. Oh, I think they also programmed the self-destruct on Sovereign as well. That's right. I forgot. They actually set the space station to blow up because they realized that Sovereign was, up to no good. So Sovereign was actually one of the many stations created by this guy named Chairman Kim. Chairman Kim is currently serving, hundreds of consecutive life sentences because after creating a bunch of realistic AI sex robots, which is what made his company wealthy, he decided to start using the same technology to replace a bunch of like other CEOs and politicians and other people, and just started kidnapping all these people and replacing them with AI robots programmed to basically act like them, but to also be loyal to him. When he got caught, needless to say, people were not thrilled, and so he was sent away forever. However, Sovereign, after being reawakened by the space pirates, decided that it was going to continue the mission. So the party ends up managing to get in. I think they actually planted a bomb. They couldn't overwrite Sovereign's controls because he can just, do whatever he wants. But they actually sabotaged the nuclear reactor that kept the station running and escape on Cal's ship and head down to the planet. The station is destroyed behind them. Whatever, right? They fight their way through all these weird like ghost creature things and finally managed to reach the heart of the temple, which has like this giant door. They also meet Cal's grandfather, who he was looking for, but of course the party realized that's a little too coincidental to be true. And of course it wasn't. It turns out that his grandfather was also replaced by a robot. He manages to find this giant door. The door is like 1,000 feet high and it's like got all these like weird stars in it. It's not like a traditional door. It's essentially just this giant door frame, and then everything is just black with like these, I believe they were either red stars or gold stars. One was one. They find the other door the other time. I can't remember which was which. But Cal tries to open the door, but the door is too big for him to open by himself. So he manages to go through this satchel of his, and he's got a bunch of like drawings of different people. And one of the spells that he's able to cast is that he can try to communicate with people if he has like a strong realistic like likeness of them, right? He tries to communicate with the first two, but they're too far away. They're basically just too many worlds removed. But he manages to reach this one girl named Veronica. And Veronica was one of my favorite NPCs ever. I basically patterned her after like a combination of like 5 or 6 girls that I used to know in real life that I used to go out to the bars with all the time. And she's like all their best and worst attributes all rolled into one. And she was awesome. Oh, she was a great NPC. All my players both loved and hated her, as they should. So she's currently at a club, and she starts going on this huge spiel. Like Cal's trying to tell her, "Hey, I need you to like get back to the Grand Stair and help me open this giant door because it's too big for me to open by itself. And we're kind of running low on our life support here. Things aren't looking too good, you know." Oh, Dr. Song lost an arm, so she's carrying it around and clubbing people with her metal arm, of course. So Veronica goes on this huge rant though about how uh, tonight was supposed to be her friend Megan's stagette party, but they found out that Megan's boyfriend or fiance Chad was cheating on her with their friend Stacy, and now everything's all falling apart. So at first they canceled it, but then they were all like angry and depressed because they had nothing to do. So Veronica decided girls' night out. So they all like decided to go to the club anyway, right? So she's just going on and on and on about this, and Cal's just like, please, just like focus for a minute. I need you to get back to the grand stair and try to like open a gateway for me, right? Help me open this gateway. So she's like, fine, whatever. She's like, I didn't just pick this club by accident. It turns out there's a door leading to the grand stair and this like underground casino thing right across the street. But it's kind of run by the mob. So she decides to go deal with the mob, and she's trying to find. She has this purse, which is essentially like a portable hole or like a giant bag of holding, and she has this weird like little tiny baby Cthulhu monster type thing that lives inside her purse, named Carl, but she can't communicate with him. So he's always like, she asks him for her Glock, but he can't find it for her, and eventually he finds a rapier, so she's like, good enough. But she manages to take one of the guards there named Tony. Oh, they were all named Tony, by the way, because it was the Italian mob. So there's Tony 1, Tony 2, Tony 3. Then, of course, there's Big Tony, who's the boss of the mob. There's Little Tony, who's the boss's son. And then there's Cousin Anthony, but he's an Anthony, not a Tony, so he might not really count. Anyway, she takes Tony prisoner, uses him as a human shield, and manages to get into the club, open the doorway, get to the grand stair, and then decides to bring Tony with her, and he's actually pretty cool with that, because he's just like, wow, there was a portal to another dimension in the back of our club. Who knew, right? So Tony comes with her, and they manage to like open the doorway and come through. Unfortunately, the droids only, basically in order to stop my players from bringing high-tech stuff into like fantasy or low-tech worlds, I made it so that while the magic is universal, technology only worked in whatever realm that it was in, right? So even if you bring like a computer from one realm to another, it wouldn't work in the new realm, even though both realms have computers, right? But each one was specific to the realm it was from. Basically just to stop my players from, bringing giant power mechs to, this grand stair. So unfortunately, the droids try to make it through, but our base Susie droid deactivates upon reaching the stair. I think Dr. Song actually detonated it herself in order to destroy a bunch of the monsters and save the party. She had a nice heroic death, which I completely missed to talk about right now. Just, imagine in your mind that at the appropriate time, I'd mentioned that Dr. Song sacrifices herself to save the party, and it's very touching, it's very heroic, great NPC there. So she's gone. The party manages to reach the stair, and that was essentially the prologue to the campaign. At this point, the party have managed to reach the stair. They end up finding out that there's a labyrinth at the heart of the stair, and that anybody who navigates this labyrinth gains the ability to find and open all these doors that lead to, all sorts of different realms and universes, right? So the party do that. They manage to navigate the maze, of course, and not too long after that, they actually get summoned by this like magical ritual by one of the women who is also one of the stairwalkers, and as she dies, because she's like just covered in blood at the time, and the party is like, what the heck just happened? Like, how did we just get pulled here? She tells them that there's a traitor somewhere among like the leadership of the Gossamer Lords, as they call themselves, right? Because the Gossamer worlds are all like, none of the worlds are real. They're all kind of shadows of each other is the idea. Anyways, so she tells them there's a traitor. They basically try to report this to the only people they know, which is Cal and Cal's buddy Luke. And those two tell them like, hey, we need to take this to the boss. So they go to see this woman named Vala, who's kind of the unofficial leader of the Gossamer Lords. And she decides to put them in charge of trying to find the traitor. And her reasoning is basically like, number one, these guys are brand new, so it's pretty unlikely that any of them are the traitor. And nobody really knows who they are, which kind of allows them to operate a little more freely. And, they're also honest enough to tell her what's going on, so she's like, okay, I think you guys are going to be my team of people to find and hunt down the traitor. So our party was pretty excited about that. I remember my one player in particular, Troy, he was very, very grabbed by this plot line. He really enjoyed it, like starting to put together the clues. So one of the things they do is they had a funeral for the dead woman whose name was Tsarina, like Tsar, Tsarina, kind of like the Russian czars. Anyways, so at the funeral, they get to meet a bunch of the people, and they start trying to figure out like who maybe is the traitor and who isn't. I did tell them though, I'm like, this isn't the kind of thing you're going to wrap up tonight. Like the hunt for the traitor is like a fairly long story, right? Then they had like this funeral procession, and they take her to this dead world named Finisterra, which means last Earth apparently, and they ended up like laying her remains to rest, right? However, they also meet this NPC by the name of I think his name is Luther, no relation to Lex, of course. And it turns out that he has been kind of in self-imposed exile because the parties found out about this group called the Dwemerlach, which were like the ancient enemies of the Gossamer Lords at one point. In fact, the Dwemerlach were like the first ones to really find and start using the Grand Stair, and then it started using the stair as like this essentially marshalling ground so they could spread their armies throughout the universe and conquer like all these different realms, right? Eventually, though, they came to war with the Gossamer Lords, and Luther actually invented this weapon that he called the Stair Breaker. He used it, and it literally severed a bunch of worlds from the stair, and these worlds all kind of plunged into the abyss, which, you know, technically kind of surrounds the entire multiverse, right? And these worlds were all lost. Rather horrified, though, at the effectiveness of his own weapon, I guess maybe an Oppenheimer type parallel, he decides that he's just going to go into self-imposed exile, and he dismantles his weapon, vowing to never use the thing again because it was way too effective, right? And it did work, though. The Dwemerlach, for the most part, were like lost into shadow, although they managed to survive and started like pulling a bunch of the worlds back and tried to like make themselves their own counterpart to the stair. Not so successfully, but, you know, it kind of gets the job done for them. I think the party thought the Dwemerlach were going to be like the big main enemy in the campaign, and I did kind of hint at that, but really it was the hunt for the traitor, who was, you know, working with the Dwemerlach, but the Dwemerlach were kind of just more shadowy figures. I feel if I ever do a follow-up campaign, I think they will be the main villains, but at least for now, you know, they were just kind of this group out there, and everybody's worried that they're going to come back again. Anyways, so one of the first things they do is they end up going to meet this one guy who runs this thing called the Impossible Pyramid, which is kind of like a mini hub of like different worlds. And so it's got like, you know, it's basically just like a pyramid, right? And it's got doors on like each of the sides leading to different worlds, right? Oh, the party also recovered this thing called the Duat key, which is what Tsarina had, that she had stolen from the traitor. And so they start trying to use the key because the key had the ability to also like find and locate doors, but from a much bigger range than the Gossamer Lords themselves can. So they start using the key to try to basically retrace Tsarina's steps, because they reasoned, correctly so, that, you know, obviously she got killed because she knew something. So let's figure out where she was and what she might have found out. So they begin trying to like retrace her steps, and they realize that she's come through the pyramid and through one of the worlds there. So they meet with a guy who runs the pyramid, and because of the Duat key, they're able to find basically like this hidden door that even he didn't know there, which was basically in the floor. He knew there were doors in all the walls, but he hadn't really realized that there was also a door leading down beneath, right? So they go through that door, and it takes them into this like nightmare dream world. Basically, in like the Endless Realms cosmology, they had like a world of dreams and a world of nightmares, but there's also like this border area between them, which was like kind of this ground that I think it was like the Queen of Nightmares and the King of Dreams, they constantly like fought over, right? And so they kind of appear in like the neutral zone between them, and they end up finding this like inn. And I took some of the inspiration from this from a Korean TV show named Hotel de Luna. Mostly the TV show is about like this hotel for the dead, and basically it's kind of like purgatory. These people who die and weren't able to resolve their issues in life go to the hotel, and then the hotel staff try to help these people resolve whatever it was that was still bothering them in life, so that they can, go to heaven or whatever, right? It was not a bad show. I've seen better, but it was pretty good. It had a lot of weird supernatural stuff, which I liked. The lead actress is yet another Korean pop star turned actress by the name of IU. She is very good, a very, very talented actress. I don't know about pop stars. I'm a metal guy, so I don't really care about the K-pop angle, but she's a very good actress. I didn't really want to go that route. I decided that the inn was going to be kind of a sort of the same inspiration, but in this case, it was going to be all the staff members who were basically trapped in this world and needed the players to help them resolve their issues. And the basic idea is, because these people, like the actual people, are probably all long dead. These are like dream images of them that are trapped in the world between the world of dreams and the world of nightmares. But because the players are here physically, they're able to like actually make changes compared to like these dream people who just are stuck in these endless cycles, right? So they meet all the main people at the end. There's like this maid girl who's like this squirrel, raccoon type girl or whatever she is. There was the woman who was like in charge of like housekeeping and all that stuff. There's the bartender. There was the bellhop, and then there's the woman who runs the inn, right? And so the party start figuring out all of their stories and realizing that each of them has something that, is kind of trapping them here in this world, right? So one by one, they start resolving all those issues and helping all of them. And I remember the one, I can't remember all of them anymore because it's been a long time, but the one, I took this storyline from a zombie show by the name of Kingdom. Basically, the woman had a child. She was invited to this like event with the queen, and it turned out all these other women there were all these like commoners, but there was like a war going on. So the queen, supposedly, in order to help the little people, had invited them all to this banquet, right? But what really happened was that the queen herself was pregnant, but she'd had a miscarriage, and she didn't want to tell anybody, and she wanted a son to be the new heir. So when she realized that some of these people who were all pregnant, some of them might have kids, she just kidnaps like 10 of them from her own feast, right? And they're all peasants, and their husbands are all off at wars. So what are people going to do, right? So this woman ends up nearly dying, but she manages to live and escapes, but never knew what happened to her son. So the party managed to figure out what happened, and I tell you, Troy was just on fire that night. Every little thing, he was just like, oh, this is this, and this is this, and that ties into that, and oh, wait, I was wrong about this is this, and this, and this. And yeah, he was just on fire. And like almost immediately, he's like, oh, the queen isn't really pregnant. She wants an heir. So she kidnapped this woman's kid so that he became the prince and probably the king. I'm like, son of a gun. Because yes, 100%. But when she found out that her son became the king and had probably had a great life, then, she was happy. And so her things were resolved. One of the other ones was kind of like this unrequited love story, but she ends up she's a sucker for the knight in shining armor type, but the party just happened to have a knight by the name of Sir Rayburn. So she ends up falling in love with him instead. And then basically she ends up going off with like this dream image of him, and the two of them go off in their own little realm and be happy. And then Rayburn just continues with the party. So most of the stuff like that. But once they like resolved all that, they were able to like access the one door that Serena had originally come through. And they bounce through a few more worlds. Eventually, though, they get, well, not even eventually, fairly soon, they get to Japan. Except, of course, that's not really our world's version of Japan. Oh, I forgot about Veronica and all her friends, too. All right, we'll talk about Veronica really quick first. So, while the party is off, like, jaunting between these different worlds, trying to find the traitor, they end up getting a call from Veronica, essentially, like the good old Cal system. I got a picture of the party members, right? And actually, I think they were something else. I think it was, like, chess pieces that were carved to look like them. But anyways, so she tells them she needs a hand. She can't get a hold of Cal, and she wants their help, right? So the party ends up going and meeting with her, and they go to New York, because it turns out that the Italian mob is not very happy with Veronica, after she like kind of wrecked their club and stole one of their guys, and kind of made them all look like fools and everything else, right? But they couldn't find her. But they could get the footage from the bar that they were at right across the street, and they see all the friends she's with. So they end up kidnapping all the girls from Girls' Night Out. So Veronica and the party end up going to try to save them. They fight their way through this like hotel, which is completely run by the mob. And I kind of wanted something that sort of felt like The Raid, if anybody's ever seen that, or the later Judge Dredd, not the Stallone one, but the other one, where you're basically fighting through all these floors of villains. It was pretty fun. They end up rescuing all the girls, except they find out that Megan's been taken by the leader of the mafia, Big Tony, right? So they go to try to rescue her. They find like there's some estate that Big Tony owns in like upstate New York, outside the city. So they head upstate, and they end up taking the mob's limo, except none of them know how to drive. So their one friend Jen, or was it Jenny? They had a friend named Jen and another friend named Jenny, and mostly because I had 3 girls I used to go to the bar named Jen, Jenny, and Jennifer, and then you had to keep track of which one was which. But anyways, so none of the party know how to drive. So, and Jen's never driven a limo, so she performs this perfect like 7,000 point turn as she tries to get the limo out of the parking stall. But eventually, the party gets onto the road and manages to go to upstate New York. They end up fighting Little Tony and Big Tony. And it turns out that Big Tony is actually a vampire, because Veronica's version of Earth has vampires in it. They end up beating him and saving Megan, though. Megan nearly became a bride after all, but now she was nearly a vampire bride. So they end up saving her, and this was kind of the party's like first like real one-on-one interactions with Veronica and with Tony, the bodyguard. And so they were ridiculous. Veronica has like no sense of direction, so there was like this one pretty funny part where the party has no idea where they're going, and they're in New York. They've never been there, and she's like, "All right, let's go." And then just on a whim, I just kind of like go like this because I pointed, and I thought actually it'd be funny if she like just pointed the wrong direction. So she starts going, and then Tony's like, and she's like, "Oh," and just turns around, starts walking the other direction, and like everybody at the party was just like, "Oh my goodness." But I personally thought it was funny. I loved Veronica. She was awesome. Anyways, they end up defeating Big Tony and save Megan. So, it's for the best. Although it doesn't mean Megan didn't get married again. 0 for 2, Megan. Bad luck. But what do you expect? You were dating a Chad. Of course, that was always going to go bad. Anyways, Japan. Getting back to that. So this, of course, was our Pacific Rim tribute, I'll call it. Not blatant rip-off of. But let's be fair, Pacific Rim is, stolen from Godzilla and Japanese anime, right? So, whatever. And that's part of the reason I put it in Japan, by the way. So anyways, the party go there. They come out on this door, which is actually, like, just on this beach. And before too long, they meet a bunch of Japanese soldiers, who I named after a bunch of Japanese professional volleyball players so that I'd be able to remember their names, as well as the members of the female all-Japanese metal band Love Bites, who are awesome, by the way. If you've never heard Shadowmaker, do yourself a favor. Check out Shadowmaker by Love Bites. Anyways, in fact, anything by Love Bites. All their stuff's great. But anyways, so they end up meeting with them. They find out the situation. There's like the giant kaiju. And basically it turns out that like 1,000 years ago, there was this giant space battle. There was these 2 warring aliens. And the one, in order to try to get away, they were like a scientific research vessel. So in order to try to get away, they tried to land on Earth. And the other guys just came in too hard and fast. And the Earth's gravity essentially destroyed their giant warship. And the remnants of their ship crashed on Earth. The science vessel crashed on Earth. And then the 2 have basically been using humans as proxies in their still ongoing war, right? So the one group of called the Kappa, they've technically been helping the humans. They're the ones who first designed the giant mechs, as well as giving us like a bunch of crazy technology and stuff. But the humans are the ones that are kind of all suffering the consequences. And then the other one are the Oni, both of which are races based on like demons and Japanese mythology, of course. And the Oni are the ones that have been basically creating the giant kaiju. They're essentially just like grow them and clone them in these giant research labs, right? So the party ends up, they manage to reach the one gate, and there's this giant wall that's like all banned with turrets and lasers and stuff like that. But there's one kaiju attacks the gate, so the party see that, and they basically trying to save some of the soldiers and not get killed. But they're told that one of the giant mechs is 4 minutes away and it's inbound, right? So of course, Pacific Rim style, this giant mech comes racing, but walking through the ocean essentially. They're not that far out. It's Japan, it's all ocean around the islands, and it cuts there and helps to destroy the giant kaiju, but the mech also gets pretty badly damaged. The party managed to save the pilot though, and all is well that ends well. They go back to the main castle, and the party realize that there's actually two factions among the aliens. There's the main faction, which don't really care about the humans at all. They just see us as tools to help them fight the Oni, right? But then there's another faction that they're just kind of sick of being stuck on Earth, and they just want to go back home. But none of their leaders seem to have even the slightest bit of interest. And they're like, we have built a ton of giant super mechs, but we haven't fixed our spaceship. We could fix the spaceship. If we can build giant mechs, we can fix the spaceship. So they end up teaming up with them, as well as another of the members of Love Bites, Miyako, my favorite. For obvious and unobvious reasons, she also composes most of their music. Anyways, and plays the piano and guitar. Triple threat. Anyways, they end up teaming up with her. She ends up being some sort of ninja chick that's secretly working for the one scientist that just wants to get the heck off Earth and go back home again. And they end up building this giant super mech, because this guy's okay, let's destroy their main lab, take out the Dragon Prince, who's the biggest kaiju of all time, and try to go home. So he designs this giant super mech, which requires multiple pilots, as well as multiple people to run different stations. This way my party members would all be able to contribute. So he trains them how to use the guns and all this kind of stuff. They're building this mech. The party's here for months, of course. We just kind of skip over a bunch of time. I think it was about 6 months. But they've got tons of people working on this project, right? And party ends up going to what's basically North Korea in our world, but that's where part of the ship landed. And they end up fighting the Dragon Prince. They managed to prevail and managed to reach the next door they need to reach after, saying their goodbyes to all of our Japanese heroes. There were some interesting role-playing stuff here too. Two of the Japanese soldiers were brother and sister. I actually named them after the Ishikawa brother and sister, who both play for the Japanese men's and women's volleyball teams respectively. And he was really concerned because females being in the military was actually a fairly recent thing for them. And so a bunch of the party members being, more progressive, they're like, oh, women can be in the military if they want. But he was just kind of yeah, but what are we fighting for to preserve if everybody in our civilization is just going to die in endless wars, right? And we had some good philosophical discussions with him. I was quite happy with it. But I don't feel like bogging down this video even more with that kind of stuff. Essentially, they managed to continue on the mission, though, and they get through there and continue on their way. They end up meeting up with Cal and Veronica a couple more times. They have a bunch of other crazy adventures. At one point, like I said, they end up going to this one world to access this deep under... Well, I was going to say under the sea. There actually is one under the sea too. Yeah, they end up joining this crew on this the submarine, but that was a bit later. First, though, they find out about this base that was actually built by Chairman Kim, a guy who's serving hundreds of consecutive life sentences. And they need him because he actually has, it's the DNA of this stairwalker who calls himself Poseidon. He's not really Poseidon, but, that's what he calls himself. He was actually this powerful water mage, though. And this guy has part of his DNA, which they need to open this vault that was owned by Poseidon, right? And so they have to stage this prison break, essentially, from this super high-tech robot-run facility. However, the fact that it was run by robots turned out to be a good thing because the party was able to find someone to help them hack into the computer system. And then from there, look, hacking in was very difficult. But once they were in, it's all just computers. So if you just reprogram the computers, they were able to get what they want. So anyways, they go to this world. This is where we meet the Sky Koreans, not to be confused with the Space Koreans. They're all technically the same race because they were back in like that same universe again, just on a different planet in that universe. But this one was the one with the Tesla coils. So they end up meeting up with all these kids that run this like courier sky bus type thing. But it turns out that this is their first ever voyage, and their ship is maybe not in the best of condition. They bought it used. I stole the entire main crew from the show All of Us Are Dead. If anybody's ever seen that, it's a Korean zombie show. That way I could, remember all the names of the characters and just write them down, and I knew who everybody was. So they end up meeting all them, but it's kind of funny because the one player, Jaden, he was just like, let's just get rid of these guys. These suck. But everybody else is just like, man, I love these kids. They're hilarious. Let's totally go with them. Of course, they end up getting attacked by like an actual group of sky pirates as well. All their ships, because this world has just like all these perpetual storms, and everything is just kind of like flying. They're all run off like electric power, but it's power they're actually gathering from the atmosphere. So there's like lightning rods everywhere, and like I said, like giant Tesla coil type things, and they're gathering like energy from the ambient air around them, all the electricity they need. And so they end up going with them. They end up finding this kid who is like this young guy, but he's kind of like this genius hacker. But he tells them he will help them if they free his sister from the Skymax. So at first the party's like, yeah, I don't think so. If your sister's in there, it's probably for good reason. But it turns out she's basically a political prisoner. And a lot of the people in these prisons, they actually don't age because they're put into cryo sleep. I decided, though, that might be a little too lenient because their society isn't, always the best. And so by law, everybody had to serve like at least 25% of their sentence actually like not in cryo sleep. So he tells them like, we need to get my sister out. She's innocent. She's like a political prisoner. And if you help me save my sister, then I will help you guys. So sure enough, they team up with this guy. They decide to ambush, rather than try to like break into the prison, which would have been very, very difficult. Instead, they ambush like a prison transport, right? So, and they also fought the sky pirates, like I said. So that was a pretty funny fight too. They fight the pirates, and in the end, they end up stealing the pirate ship and then just give that to the kids. So now the kids have 2 ships. So they've just doubled their business. So the kids are like, okay, if you guys need help, we got you covered. So like, okay, like, can you guys just stay outside the prison maybe? Like, stay far enough back, like a few kilometers off or whatever. And if we need you, we'll call you. And they're like, okay. So they have it all set up, right? So they ambush the prison transport, take it over. They manage to get in because, the transport's now late, but it is scheduled to be there. And there are some humans in the station as well, just basically the fail-safe in case the droids, malfunction or something, right? But most places just run by computers. They're able to like hack in and basically like ask for a prison transfer for this girl and for Chairman Kim. The humans are a little suspicious, but between Sir Maxwell and Sir Rayburn, these guys just have like, it's called presence in this game, but it's basically just charisma. They have just like the greatest charisma rolls ever. And so they just like convince the guards, like, look, here's our transfer orders, everything's it's in your computer. We're talking about. They're like, oh, we would have known about this. It's like, well, obviously you didn't. You were probably slacking off your jobs, if you don't want us to report you, you should probably bring us our prisoners right away. So sure enough, they end up getting Chairman Kim and they rescue the girl. They team up again with the kids, now with 2 ships instead of 1, and manage to get themselves basically this like bathysphere ship, because they need to go like way down close to the planet's surface, but the gravity down there is just absolutely insane, right? So to get this ship that's specifically designed for that, it's actually like a mining ship originally, But I decided, what the heck, the kids can pilot that too. Why not? Make things easy. We don't need to involve even more NPCs. We've already got like 10 NPCs on this mission, right? So they go down to the actual base that Chairman Kim has down there, which is run by AIs as well. However, the AI feels rather abandoned by him and is not happy to see him again. It's also become like truly self-aware at this point, right? So the AI basically disobeys Chairman Kim and ends up helping the party. Chairman Kim tries to screw the party over by locking them in his base and evacuating and escaping, but the AI just overrides him. So he manages to like run and gets back onto the ship and tries to like lock the party out. But the AI actually has something she wants from the party as well. Basically, she wants them to make a duplicate of her consciousness and put it in one of the droids. So, and then her idea is that every, few years or every decade or every 100 years, whatever it is, she's immortal, right? That the AI can come back and then they can like essentially copy each other's memories again, and then she'll be able to like essentially experience the outside world again because she's in this base and doesn't know anything ever, right? And she just wants to see what the outside world was like. So the party like, okay, so they put her into another version of Dr. Song, or one robot from there at the beginning of the story. They put her into Dr. Song and make a copy. So now we've got AI running the base, and we've got the exact same AI currently. Obviously, her experiences are about to start differing in the droid, right? And then they agree that they're just going to keep meeting up every now and then and copy each other's memories, right? So the party ends up escaping with her. She's able to open the bathysphere. The party are able to get in. They take off. They jettison Chairman Kim out an airlock. So Chairman Kim does not make it back alive, obviously. And manage to return. They're able to find... at some point they ended up fighting... the traitor had like a couple of minions that were working for him, right? So they find the one because they've managed to trace back to Zarina's original world where she was originally from. So she actually used to be a police officer in this world, right? So they end up tracing her there and find her old partner who has no idea whatever happened to her. She just disappeared one day, but it's because she found out about the traitor. And she's basically immortal. So she's been a cop for 180 years or whatever it was, right? I had some interesting stuff because at one point they end up seeing, they find footage and I tried to make it look like Veronica was actually the villain, but the party didn't fall for it, even though they clearly see Veronica's face. They started getting suspicious because she's like caught in this like security droid thing that's flying around, right? And she pulls back the curtains in this place after murdering somebody, and the party like, wow, it's Veronica. But they started getting pretty suspicious pretty quickly, and it also seemed a little too convenient that she just happens to pull back the curtains right when she hears the security droid flying outside the window, right? And of course, it was too suspicious because the person's actually a shape changer. So they end up finding out this woman named Grendel who was actually at a funeral. So they'd actually met her before. And I think they'd actually found out she was a shape changer, but they kind of forgot about it by then, right? So they end up having their fight with her. They end up finding... Cal's been missing for some time, so they end up finding her and Cal. They try to fight her, or actually they try to rescue Cal and send Cal with Veronica at this point, but then he ends up stabbing Veronica and they realize that this isn't Cal, this is actually Grendel. So they end up fighting her, they end up killing her. It turns out that she was some sort of like demon type race, and that the main traitor was actually controlling her because he'd gotten her true name. So she wasn't allowed to like reveal certain things, but she kind of found a workaround because she left like a recorded message telling him everything she could. She couldn't reveal his identity and a couple other things, but she'd left this message for Veronica, and so the party was able to find out some more information, right? Including one of the other people that's working with him. So they're able to save Cal. They find what the traitor's destination is and end up going there, right? So this is why they needed Poseidon's DNA. I forgot about that. So they go through They take the submarine thing. They're with this crew. The entire crew is kind of sketchy to begin with. I based a lot of these villains off the Forsaken from the Wheel of Time, the books, not the TV show, which is an abomination. But whatever. Of course, they end up getting betrayed by these guys. Go figure. But it turns out this underwater base of Poseidon's is essentially like another mini Grand Stair almost, right? It's got like these 20 doors or so in it, or maybe it was 40 doors. I can't remember. But leading to these different worlds. But a lot of these were like not safe, right? Some of these worlds were dead. Some of them were worlds where the worlds had been separated by the stair breaker. And so using those doors wasn't entirely safe. But one of them led to the Dwemerlac. And another one led to the home world that the Dwemerlac had originally come from. So they get betrayed by one woman whose name was Lanfear. She ends up killing herself accidentally by trying to open the gate to the Dwemerlac world, and she just gets like sucked into it, basically. They end up fighting her later, though. She turns into some sort of like weird blood demon ghost creature thing. So they end up fighting her on the way out. But anyways, on the way in, though, they end up going to the Dwemerlac's original homeworld. And they meet the woman who is the mother of the current Dwemerlac Empress, it turns out, right? And she tells them about like the origin of their people and how originally they were, just like these mystics and mage types people. But eventually they'd end up finding this like dead god on one of the worlds they found, right? And because they went through this doorway that was like 1,000 feet high. So we're getting back to original space gods again that we had from the beginning, right? And they find this tomb to this ancient dead god, and they decided, for whatever reason, to cannibalize said dead space god. And a bunch of them died from it, turns out, but those who survived gained like incredible powers, right? And this is how they were first able to start like really conquering like the universe, because their magic was just like magnified. They had all sorts of like weird mental powers, but they also kind of went a little crazy too, right? She basically tells them, about their history, about their origins and stuff, as well as how to open the door to the Dwemerlac world, because she says there's like a couple different gates, but they all required like opposing fields of magic, right? So like order and chaos or life and death, but the party doesn't have an animancer, so they don't have access to life and death magic. But they do have Veronica and Cal, who happen to be, in Veronica's case, chaos magic, and Cal was order magic, which is why, even though those two clearly like each other, it's just destined to always fail because, order and chaos. Anyways, so they managed to get them to come on through, guys. We'll open a door for you. And they end up opening the door. They end up going in, meeting the Dwemerlac, convince the Dwemerlac. Oh, they have one of the most brutal fights they have. They fight the Guardian that's like there to guard that gate. And one of the party members, at first we thought he was dead, but then one of the players was like, wait, I can do this and save him. So they ended up doing that. And then one of the other party members nearly died. He was on the verge of death. But they do manage to defeat the Guardian. And they end up having their audience with the Empress of the Dwemerlac, who is pretty crazy. But her mom gave her like this doll she used to have when she was young. So she realizes that she should probably just trust the party on this one. Plus the party reveal, like, obviously the traitor is going to betray you guys. He's, he doesn't want you guys back on the Grand Stair either, But basically his plan was he had found this, essentially the labyrinth is sort of order, and he'd found this thing that was essentially chaos. It's like essentially the universe's opposite of the Grand Stair. And because this guy was an animancer and is used to having like life and death magic and balancing the two between them, most people wouldn't be able to do this, but in his case, because he's incredibly powerful and because he's, plot reasons made up by me, he's able to gain basically the powers of the Grand Stair and of the Logres, right? Which is what its opposite is, right? Which I stole from the Amber books, but that's okay, because the whole Gossamer Lords and the Grand Stair, it's all stolen from the Amber books anyways. Or adapted, sorry. It's an homage. It's not a ripoff. It's a tribute. Anyways, but his plan is basically to make himself into a living door god, essentially, right? Where he can just think of any world he wants to and he can just go there. He wouldn't even need to open doors. He could just like basically have all the powers of the Grand Stair, but internalized, you know, not having to jump between different worlds and stuff, right? So the party ended up going into the labyrinth, and they fight him. They don't have to navigate the labyrinth. Basically, the Empress just like opens the door to like where it comes out. So the party are waiting for him as he comes through. They end up fighting the other two, of course, basically his servants. They kill them, and then we have the big boss fight at the end, and the party manages to win. They save the day. They destroy a stair breaker weapon completely at this point, so that you know nobody's going to try to use it ever again. And that's essentially where the campaign ended. They come back home, and you know everything's good. So, like I said, the campaign ran from like levels 1 to 12 or 13, somewhere around there. It was pretty fun. There was a ton of worlds that I'm just skipping over, but you know, it was kind of neat that they were able to explore like a lot of different types of ideas in the one campaign. We had future stuff. We had like on a lot of different types of future stuff, right? You had traditional spaceships. You had weird lightning ships. You had, you know, AI robots and AI facilities and stuff. But then you also had like, you know, New York with vampires, you know, and stuff like that, right? So I don't know. For me, it was a lot of fun. I just got to use a lot of like weird, crazy ideas and just throw stuff out there. And if it worked, it worked. And if it didn't, that's okay. We just moved on to a different world and, you know, everything was fine, right? Like I said, as usual, I take inspiration from a lot of different things. In this case, there was a lot of Korean TV shows. Ever since Squid Game, I started watching a lot of Korean TV because it turns out that Korea makes some great shows. Who knew? I sure didn't before Squid Game. So, you know, I clearly took a lot of inspiration from that. Mostly, though, because I knew it was stuff my players had never watched. And so they wouldn't be familiar with all the ideas that I paid tribute to, did not steal, paid tribute to, from, you know, all the Korean television, right? And then obviously, like I said, the Lords of Gossip and Shadow is heavily influenced by Amber, you know, which is fine. And, you know, things like the Kaiju world, which I actually took from Lords of Gossip and Shadow. That was not really my invention. That was a scenario that I took from them, but it's clearly inspired by Pacific Rim. But like I said, Pacific Rim's, you know, inspired by things like Godzilla and, you know, anime, right, with giant mechs and stuff, right? So don't be afraid to rip stuff off, is what I'm saying. Just put your own fun spin on it, and like you don't have to feel even like you have to like hide the source. Because if the players like I just told my players, yeah, there's like a Pacific Rim world, and they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, like the movie Pacific Rim, there's a world like that, and they were like, what? So then when they got there, they're like, oh yes, this must be the world, and they were like all excited about it, you know. And it didn't matter that I stole it from a movie. All my players were like, man, this is awesome. I can't believe we're like piloting giant mechs, fighting giant kaiju. You know, it was awesome. Like I said, don't be afraid to like take things from different sources. You know, it's fine. My biggest advice as a DM is that as long as the game is fun, your players will not care. They would really rather play something that's kind of cheesy but fun than something that's like super serious and, you know, you spend all your time bickering about rules and trying to interpret, is this the way this rule is supposed to be or not? Like, that kind of stuff's not fun. Giant mechs, though, that is kind of fun. Crazy AI robots, that was fun, you know? It was a fun campaign. That's what I'm saying. Anyways, that's basically everything I have. I just wanted to, we're not going to have a part 2. I just covered the entire campaign in one video. But overall, I thought it was really fun. And I really, really enjoyed the campaign. My players really loved it too. They've bugged me a couple times now about like, oh, maybe we should go back to that at some point. So I'm just like, I kind of used like most of my ideas in the original campaign. There's still more I could do, but I'd need like another big overarching story, you know. But overall, it was awesome. And, you know, I got to throw in tributes to some of my favorite Japanese volleyball players and metal bands as well. So, you know, it was all good. Anyways, that's everything. Feel free to like, subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, and most importantly, leave your comments in the comment section. I would love to hear your comments or questions or just like, you know, random input, like that sounds like a crazy adventure or whatever. I don't care, just whatever you got. Anyways, Started to lose my voice. That's always a sign that it's time to wrap things up. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.